Welcome back to Attitude Effort Results presented by Teamwork Online and now the Clubhouse. Yes, we are partnering with the Clubhouse as we want to continue to give you platform, to give you resources to grow in your career, whether that be in the sports industry or a career choice or career of your choosing. Today's very special, and we're going to jump right in. I have an elite individual here with me today. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and we are going to jump right in. I am introducing the former CEO of the Rose Bowl, Darryl Dunn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tanner. Love being here.
I'm very excited to learn about your career path. The first time that we talked, I was so moved by the career path that you took. A lot of people see a CEO and they're like, oh my goodness, like I really, really want to be a C-level exec. And everybody talks about working hard and grinding. Starting at the bottom is exactly where you did. Yeah. Walk us through the birth of your career all the way up to being the CEO of the Rose Bowl.
Great, sure, happy to. So what happened with me is, when I was a kid, I love sports. I learned how to read by looking at the box scores, and my first word was Yastrzemski, because I grew up in New England and born in Connecticut and became a Red Sox fan at a very young age. And anyway, I always knew I wanted to be in sports, and I also enjoyed writing. So I always thought I was going to be a sports writer, being a reporter. That was my intent. And so I went to college at St. Bonaventure, small school upstate New York, about 2,000 kids, and a very good journalism school. And I got my degree in there, and then when I got out, I had to decide what I was going to do. And my family, my mom, she had a business sort of like it was pre-Pier 1 imports, if you've ever been to Pier 1. So I worked with really my whole life. I helped out over Christmas time. It's just a retail kind of a thing. So anyway, so what happened was when I got out of college, if I wanted to get a job in sports, I would have had to go travel in the middle of nowhere and you start at the absolute. I stopped at the bottom anyway.
Yeah.
But below that, right? On that front. And my mom said, "Well, why don't you just come work in the family business for a little bit and see how that works out?" So I did. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It really, it didn't drive me at all. So I left there, and then I went and I lived in Buffalo at the time, and I moved to New York City, and I just went, and honestly, all I really did is I kept reliving my college years. I had some friends there, and I just had a lot of fun. And it was like a Groundhog Day. You go out, you have a great time. You wake up and like, what are you doing?
Shoot, I've had a lot of those.
Yeah. So but then I decided I need to do something about this. My brother lived in California, lived in Santa Monica, and so I called him, and I asked him. He had a 3-bedroom apartment. If he lived with a girlfriend at the time, and I said, "Hey, can I just use a bedroom? I'm hoping like 3 months or so, then I'll be off on my own, just to sort of give it a shot." So I went and I moved. So I just got up, packed my car about a week later, and I drove to L.A. And then I went in, and I still was looking for jobs. My big thing every day, and again, this was 1985. So my accomplishment day was if I sent out 5 resumes, did 5 follow-up phone calls, and if I did those 2 things, my reward would be I would go to the beach and do a 5-mile jog around sunset.
Okay.
And that was my thing. And I didn't know anybody. My brother and I, socially, we were in different circles. So that's all I did. I didn't do anything else. And then I got a nibble. And when I got a call from somebody who worked for Jerry Buss, who at the time owned both the Lakers as well as a hockey team, the LA Kings. And it was early June kind of a thing, Memorial Day, that type of year. And he said, "Look, I saw you wrote a letter to our public relations director, but this is not public relations, but when you come in, and we may have a summer job for you." And so I went in, and it was selling tickets. And, the deal was, he says, what we do here is during the season, all our salespeople, work in an arena as you know, you work a lot, right? And you
Very
have
true.
right, and you have multiple teams. You work a ton, and so really in the summer, the sales guys, they sort of take the foot off the gas a little bit. And Jerry Buss, his approach was he wanted to keep everybody very motivated, and he didn't want anybody taking their foot off the gas. So what they did every summer is they hired 4 to 6 young people, a year to 2 out of college, and they went in and they got a summer job. But the deal was on sales, their selling season started every year on Memorial Day for the following season, and they had it was like a board, and it had a list like numbers 1. We had a total of 16 people, 1 through 16, and it was based upon your sales results. And that's where you were.
The daunting board.
The board, yeah, it was.
Almost every sales floor most likely has some sort of board.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And you going in, and anyway, and so what the deal was, there were 16, but on Labor Day they said we're going to go down to 10, and if you're not in the top 10, thank you very much, you're done. And the people who were there for a while, they had a lot of advantages. You work games for leads. People call in, and you have call-in times. The new people didn't get anything. There was a phone room, and they gave you some leads, but then you would just drive around all of L.A., just talking to people, literally, on this front. But when I came in, I just worked, and I worked, and I worked. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't have much of a social life, so I was just focused on getting to the top 10. Well, I did. I got to number 10. So then I got a job selling tickets for Jerry Buss. He was the owner for the Lakers and the Kings. And my timing was really good. When I was there, I worked for 5 years, and the Lakers won 3 championships.
That's pretty good.
It was. He didn't have a sales team because of basketball, though. He had it because of hockey. In the Kings, this was pre-Wayne Gretzky. So it used to be attendance pools after every game, and 7,000, 8,000, 10,000. It wasn't, like it is now, where you can never get a ticket. Anyhow, so I did that, and I learned how to sell, which was one of the best skills I've ever obtained, for sure. But I had a desire in me that I wanted to get more involved in management. I was one of 10, kind of, and that's really where I was, and I wasn't going anywhere. There was a lot of rumors about Jerry Buss selling the hockey team, which he ended up doing. We didn't know what was going to happen to this organization because the Lakers didn't need us to sell tickets. This was Showtime. This was Magic and Worthy and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It was prime time from that perspective. So anyway, so what I did is you get to know people, and that's one of the real keys is your network, expanding your network. And I met a guy who worked for the Raiders. And the Raiders were in L.A. at the time. And at the time, the Raiders, they didn't have any, they didn't really believe in an outside sales team. They believed in winning. And at the time, the Raiders, they were the most dominant. It was the Raiders, the Cowboys, and the Steelers. Those were the 3 most dominant franchises then. Okay. And the Raiders were teams of the decades because they won Super Bowls in the 60s, the 70s, and also in the 80s. So I went and I talked to him about, why don't let me start when I'm working with the Lakers and the Kings. Let me go in and start that for you. So it took a while, and he finally he said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you one day, and I'm going to say to you, are you ready? And if you say yes, then you're going to need to start within a week. If you say no, we don't need to talk anymore. So I didn't know what the deal was, right? So then one day the phone rings, I pick it up, and this guy on the other line says, "Are you ready?" Am I ready? He goes, "Yeah. Are you ready to become a Raider?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm ready." So I brought one other person with me, and we started selling tickets for the Raiders, and it went well, except. The Raiders, they didn't have too many outsiders at the time. There was people who worked there. They were there for a long time. Very dedicated folks. Anyway, so I worked for the Raiders. I did that. Then the guy I worked for, he left the organization. When he left, I was sort of floundering a little bit. I didn't have anybody really looking out for me at the time. So then I ended up leaving also. And I went to work for the Clippers. And I will say, when I worked for the Raiders, one of the things I acquired the skill of is selling group tickets, because the Coliseum had 90,000 seats, and so there's a lot of tickets, and that's where the Raiders played. So I did really well selling group seats. Then I went to the Clippers and was the director of group sales for the Clippers, and that's when they were in the LA Sports Arena, and they won 12 games a year. They weren't very good. And actually at the time it used to be like a 6-pack. This 6-pack was the Sixers with Charles Barkley, the Pistons with Isaiah Thomas, the Bulls with Michael Jordan, the Celtics with Larry Bird, the Lakers with Magic and everybody else, and Utah Jazz with the Mailman, right?
Okay.
And so we used to sell really for the visiting team.
Yep.
And then you make people buy a few other games. But anyway, it worked. At the same time, though, I really liked working for the Raiders, and I really liked football a lot. And so they had a change in leadership there. So then I went and I got re-interviewed, and then they said, let's bring your position back. And so they asked me to come back. So I came back. And at the time, same thing, I brought 2 interns with me. And then the first year, we went and the backfield was Marcus Allen and Bo Jackson. So
not a bad backfield.
Not a bad backfield, right? So we went in and we did, we did great, in terms of selling tickets. The Raiders at the time, again, they still weren't that sales-oriented an organization type of thing.
Yeah.
So I went in and I did that, but it was short-lived. And then I ended up working for probably my big, the big thing that sort of pivoted me a little bit. I worked for World Cup, because in '94, the World Cup, the finals were at the Rose Bowl for the men. And so I ended up working for World Cup, selling suites for all the venues around the country. And then when that was over, though, I needed a job.
Yep.
So
almost the same thing that's happening now. I have a couple friends that are getting jobs over in Miami because it's coming back, and it's almost like a 2-year stint.
Yeah.
You either make it or you break it. It sounds like you made it and found your way right after, because it's almost like a temporary job. Because when the World Cup is over, they don't need you anymore.
The Olympics are the same thing, right? I mean, it's you're right. So that was the deal. But anyway, so then when the World Cup was over, I needed a job, and I ended up, there was a new minor league baseball league starting, and there was a team starting in Palm Springs. And they needed somebody to really run the business operations side. So I met the owner, and I ended up going there. Well, unfortunately, it didn't work out. There were some financial challenges, and it ended up being like half a year. So then I needed a job. I really needed one, because we're in Palm Springs. We gave up our rent control apartment in Santa Monica, which we were like 10 blocks from the beach, or $400, a 3-bedroom. How crazy is that to give that up?
Yeah, right.
And so, but we did, and we were in Palm Springs, and I was out of a job, and in Palm Springs there wasn't much there, so I knew I needed to get back to LA. And so I went in, and I went and I did 2 or 3 different things at once, just to literally try to pay the bills and put food on the table.
Yeah.
And one thing I ended up doing was I did contact the Rose Bowl, because I got to meet people from the Rose Bowl when I was at World Cup. And I said, hey, I know you have suites, because I sold them. How are they selling for you, besides the World Cup kind of a thing? How do they normally sell? And they said, well, we've got a bunch of vacancies. So I said, well, what if I sell them for you and just give me a commission? And I need a desk, I need a phone. Give me a desk and a phone, I'll bring my own computer.
And let me go to work.
Pretty much. So we did, and things went well. We did a lot of target marketing and that type of thing. Believe it or not, our big ad spend was classified ads, literally. Whoever was going to go to the Rose Bowl, I think the first year Ohio State was in there, and I did a bunch of ads in the Columbus Dispatch, and because we're selling suites.
Yep.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Very, really well. Anyway, things went very well there, and then my part-time job, my next break I had is the person who I reported to, he left. He had nothing to do with selling. He really ran a golf course, but they gave this to him as part of the they need somebody to overlook the premium seating. So he did it, and then he left. So then I got promoted, so I actually got a job. So now I had a 40-hour week job.
And how old are you at this point?
I was about 30, 31 maybe.
For everybody listening out there, I think there's two things so far, and then I want you to keep going. The first thing that you kind of glazed over in the beginning was that you were writing people consistently, 5 times a day, correct?
Yeah.
Consistently. How long did that go on?
Until I got the Laker job. So, from that perspective at the time, about 3 months.
3 months. So everybody out there listening, I think in today's day and age, people are like, well, I hit a button on this website and I submit a resume and I don't have a job. Like, why is nobody reaching out to me? Listen, here's the thing. You're going to have to go a little bit further. If you want to break into this industry specifically, but also if you want the job that you're looking for, instead of sitting at a desk and being in a position where almost the whole world is, right? You want to go chase something, go a little bit deeper. Write 5 notes a day to people for 3 months straight, and then you might, maybe, potentially get a chance. And then, oh, by the way, as soon as you get a chance, you didn't get a regular full-time job again until you were 30, where, listen, we're talking one of the most intelligent people in the sports industry and who is at the mecca of what we call college football stadiums. And we're listening to this man right now tell us that it was not easy early on. And that's a major message to people out there right now, especially our audience and the college-age kids and the young professionals. Like, it might not be the first job you get. It might not be the second job. You might have to continue to grind consistently because it's not going to be easy from the beginning. But if you keep going, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
I mean, I left out a short stint working for a nonprofit group as a fundraiser, on that front too. So, at one point in 5 years, I think I had 5 different positions, and so I was a little all over the map on that front. But fortunately for me, I found the right fit. And for me, the right fit was the Rose Bowl. And then when I went in, again, I was a little bit fortunate that the opportunities were there, right? The opportunities always aren't there. You may be the best salesperson or the best, whatever in the country, but the opportunity needs also to be there, so you need to pick your spots. And I will say, working at the time for a city, because the Rose Bowl was owned by the city of Pasadena, was really good. And cities own. I mean, when I think of being in the job market today, I'm going to look at the different teams and different venues. A lot of these venues are owned by public entities.
Yeah. And
they all need help. They all do. So it's not. So I do encourage anybody looking. Make sure you're looking wide. Don't be too narrow. And again, because there's a lot of different kind of jobs. Because I know sports, entertainment is exciting. You want to be around it. It's cool. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. But there's a lot of different ways to get in, and there's different avenues to pursue.
I'm curious, so you talk about the lens becoming wider. I think that's massive because there's a lot of individuals who I've talked to is like, hey, I want to be in football in the state of Arizona. And I'm like, well, you just took what's already a very small portion of jobs and just shrunk it almost to a point where it's nearly impossible. When keeping your scope broad, I always say it might not be an opportunity where you get an internship or first-time job. You might not even be looking for something you love. Maybe you're looking for something you don't want. Because if you find what you don't want, now you can keep piecing together, okay, I like this portion, but I didn't like this. I like this portion, I didn't like this. What were some of the key points that you learned throughout your career before the Rose Bowl that allowed you the opportunity when it presented itself to step into that role at the Rose Bowl?
The art of selling. Because it is an art, going into it, and really your attitude and really being very self-disciplined, because at the end of the day, I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder saying, hey, you got to make sure you make your 20 calls a day or whatever. You were pretty much, even when I worked for Jerry Buss, you're pretty much on your own. You got to go in, and at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. You just got to deliver. So you got to go in, and we came up with different programs and how we're promotions and how we're going to do it. But a lot of that was just really just in our head, and just going in, and then you pitch it and you brainstorm and you talk it through. but you got to be very, very, very self-motivated. If you're not self-motivated in this business, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to make it. And you need to enjoy the work. You have to, and it can be fun. I mean, it is. I mean, there's no question. It's gratifying. It's gratifying to see that you are making a difference. And another thing is, when I was younger, I almost looked at sales not as a dirty word, but almost like something that you really didn't want, you know?
100%. It sounds slimy from the beginning, but it's our job to make it not.
No, and it's not, and it's great. And you're going in and having those interpersonal relationships and the communication, you're going in, creating the relationships and how it can help you really the rest of your life. So sales became... If it wasn't for me having a good sales background, I never would have been CEO of the Rose Bowl. No way.
I heard it, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I'm a terrible reader, but I like listening to books and learning, and so I just listen to them on the way to work. And I listened to one the other day, and the guy said there's only 2 jobs in the world. You either sell or you service. And as soon as he said that, I was like, no way. There's no way. And I started thinking, what about the nurses and the doctors and the teachers? Like, what about all those? And you think deeper, they're all service.
Right.
And so you either sell or you service. There's a lot of people out there right now that's like, man, I don't want to get into sales. Kind of slimy, don't really like how that sounds, don't really want to be in the sales business. But there's only 2 roles if you really break it down. You talk about sales being extremely important for you. As you grow in your leadership and you are now outside of the actual selling portion, what about sales was super important for you outside of an actual sales position?
I'm not sure I understand where you're going on that one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people right now are like, I don't really want to get into sales. Like, I want to be in leadership. I want to be in management. Well, there's a time where if you start off your career in sales, that you're going to transition out of an actual sales position into leadership. What about the skills and tactics that you learned in sales itself has translated to that leadership style that you took?
Honestly, it's the fundamentals are the same. It is preparation, it's relationship building, it's executing. You just can. It's a bit of a grind, but you have to enjoy the grind. You need to be organized. It is really, for me, it wasn't that much of a difference, going in and making my to-do list and making my game plans. I mean, I did a game plan every week of my career.
Really?
Yeah, I did, in terms of what I want to try to accomplish and how we're going to get there. One of the things when I started the Rose Bowl once, I remember, everybody was telling me how to do my job, and there's one guy on my board of directors, great person. He said, well, you need to have a file on every one of your employees and have a pad. When they write something, when they do something positive, just make a note and put it in the file. When they do something not so good, make a note in the file. This way you'll have a record for yourself, and you can go in and you can talk to these people about it. So I started doing it, and then I had all these little note cards and all this stuff. And then I thought to myself, you know what? My job, what the Rose Bowl was at the time, it still is obviously an older stadium that has some significant challenges, and I had to try to figure out a pathway that can help it become successful for generations to come. So my focus was at the time was on these little note cards, and then I'm like, you know what? This is like being on a boat and me looking down to make sure my shoes are tight all the time. I got to start looking, across the ocean. How am I going to get this boat across the sea? And then I changed it, and I've read some books and I listened to probably more than I've read.
Yeah.
But I did particularly early in my career, when I was in my 20s and my 30s. Going in, like one of my favorite books I read was "Well, They Don't Teach You at the Harvard Business School," and that was written by Mark McCormick, who's considered to be arguably, the guy who really began sports marketing.
Okay. Because
his client was Arnold Palmer, and that's really how it all began. And he became chairman of IMG, and he became a very significant guy. But what they don't teach you at the Harvard Business School was really about more street smarts. It's like if you're not sure who to call if you're trying to sell, who do you start with? And his answer is you start at the top. So you call the CEO. Instead of starting with a executive assistant or the junior marketing person, You just go to the top of the company, and then they'll refer you to the right person, and then this way you can say such and such. It may not be Mr. McCormick, but it may be his assistant, and nobody wants to cross the CEO's assistant, right? Yep. Those type of things. But it was really helpful for me, and I did always try to keep it simple. Yeah, you don't overthink things, and you just try to move forward.
If you guys are in sales out there right now, what he just said is referred to as spider webbing. You start at the top. If you're going out to prospect a business, or you're going out to even on our side right now, we're going out to look for potential sponsors. We've never done it before. We have a new kid that we're training that we brought on board, and you start at the top. If you can't get to the top, then just spider web to the next guy or girl. Yep. And if you do get to the top, how awesome is it if I go to the 20th in command at the Rose Bowl and I'm like, hey, Darryl told me to reach out. You don't think the 20th in command is like, oh, all right, I'm going to open it. I'm at least opening that email.
That's true.
I'm at least reading it. So I think it's awesome in sales specifically. It's spider webbing, and it is so important.
Yeah.
You talked about leadership having to look a little further in the future as a leader. You did something at the Rose Bowl that might have changed how arenas work now, and you said it in a different podcast that I listened to, and it's on the entertainment side of the business, where the Rose Bowl was originally for football. How were you, when you were in leadership, able to change the Rose Bowl almost into an entertainment destination rather than just football?
Yeah, well, I would say in retrospect now, how we grew music is one of, if not the most gratifying part of my time at the Rose Bowl.
Really?
Yeah, because what happened was the Rose Bowl hosted the World Cup in '94, as I talked about a few minutes ago. Well, because of that, all the biggest bands in the world all wanted to play the Rose Bowl. So in 1 year, there was like 94, 95, was the Eagles, the Stones, and Pink Floyd, right? All megas.
And they're all still rolling.
Yeah, amazingly, I know.
Which is nuts.
The Eagles took a break for a while, but yeah, they're all rolling. But what happened was there was one of the world's most significant music promoters at the time. Was a gentleman who every major tour went through this guy, and he. There were some issues with all three of the shows, but particularly at the Pink Floyd show. Because at the Pink Floyd show, unfortunately, traffic and logistics made the show ended up starting like an hour and a half late. And one of those problems is it ended late, too. And the promoter, they're financially responsible for all typically labor costs. It depends on your deal with the band, but pretty much usually it's on you. And so that cost him a ton of money. And none of them went well, from what I understand. And so he basically said, we are never coming back here again. And when that happened, you don't lose just those bands. There's not that many bands that are big enough for the Rose Bowl. Because you have to sell 50, 60,000 seats just to make it, because that's pretty much for a concert, the capacity was around 60.
Yeah.
On that front. So anyway, what happened was we were blacklisted. So I came in and I started, calling the promoters, and one particular promoter at the time said, don't waste your time with us. No interest. And that was the mega one. So we tried to do shows, and we ended up doing a radio show, and we ended up getting In Sync, which was a big deal at the time. But still, like the big ones, we weren't getting anything. And then what happened was in 2008, it was announced that U2 was going to do a 360 tour in '09. So they wanted to go to all the venues just to check it out because their stage was changed. Their stage was taller than the Rose Bowls.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, and so they massive, and it was going to be again 360 in the round. So not every stadium could do it, but in LA, multiple could. So they came and they looked at it. So I called the guy again, who told me never call him again. So I kept calling him. And he finally, and I finally said to him, I'm like, Brian, it sure sounds like you don't want to talk to me. Why don't you at least give us a chance? And he says, you really want to know why? I said, yeah, why? He goes, because your traffic is terrible, and we don't want to be part of that. I'm like, Brian, you were here 15 years ago. Things change. He goes, all right, send me a PowerPoint of your traffic plan. I'm like, no, at least have the decency to allow us to come in, meet with you, and we'll show you.
Yeah.
So it was like a Monday or a Tuesday in like mid-December, and his office was in Beverly Hills. There was an old show called Entourage on HBO, and anyway, his office was where that was filmed.
Okay.
Nice location, but hard to get to, right?
He talks about traffic problems.
Yeah. So he said, okay, come here Friday at 4. And Beverly Hills is really hard to get to, and December is brutal. So when it happened, I took 2 guys with me, our traffic consultant, our parking consultant, and I called them right after the conversation. I'm like, guys, we got 3 days to put together a traffic plan. They said it's in the round, so we got to prepare for 90,000 people.
Holy smokes.
So I'm like, so we did. So we went and we pitched it. So they gave us a chance, and they did it. And we were always looking at it like an audition, but a big audition. And what happened when they started selling tickets, it just kept moving. And, they prepared for 90, but they really thought, the pro forma was 70,000 or so. We ended up selling 97,000 tickets for that event, right? It was, I think, the second or third biggest for a single band ever in North America. Was that show? It was. There's a DVD, U2 360. It's at the Rose Bowl. So they went in, and that was our audition. And fortunately, we just killed it. We did things we've never done before. We did a pre-event fan fest. It was a Sunday afternoon, so we called it Picnic in the Park. We had all these big screens with all the NFL games, and we wanted people to get there super early just to try to deal with the traffic and that type of stuff. But the show went really, really well. But when we did that got us on the map. So then all of a sudden, we were getting those shows, and then about 3 years later, we decided we did a renovation, which was way over budget, and we knew we needed another revenue stream to help us ultimately pay the bills.
Yep.
And we ended up deciding to do a music festival, and when we did that was very successful, and so that plus end of the day, music in some years made as much money for us as football did. So music became a big part of, really, even today, I think, what the Rose Bowl is.
So you're telling me the Rose Bowl right now is what it is today because you called the guy that told you not to call him?
Well, that's how it started, I'd say. I think that there's a lot more to it than that. Clearly, the people who work there and the team, going in and making so you have a good experience for people, and the parking operators and the traffic people, and everybody. I mean, like the unsung workers in every venue in the country are like the public works people, and the people who put up all the signage and the lights and pick up all the trash and they make sure the restrooms and the plumbing. I mean, there's so many. I mean, for an event, the Rose Bowl, our staff, we had like 35 people, but on an event day, we have about 5,000 people working. That's how it is at stadiums.
I think you bring up a really good point. The Suns, Mercury, now the Valley Suns, which is G League, and the Footprint Center, which is concerts and events, I think have around 250 full-time employees. But on game days, there's way more. There's one department that I think gets no credit that should get the most out of everybody, and that's the arena staff. Because the arena staff, in today's day and age, for everybody out there looking for sports jobs, there's a lot now. What I'm going to say you created. There's a lot more behind it.
Yeah.
The arena has to get flipped so often. We'll have basketball game Thursday, concert Friday, basketball game Saturday, concert Sunday, Monday. We'll have a Mercury game the next day. We'll have an in-the-round concert. Then we'll have another one. It's crazy.
Yeah, you'll probably have 250 or 300 events a year. The Rose Bowl, we ended up having 340.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, most of them are really small. But that was started to deviate a little bit. But what we looked at with the Rose Bowl is we knew there was going to be an NFL stadium in L.A. Everybody knew it. When they left, I think in '94, when we tried, the Coliseum tried, Dodger Stadium tried, everybody tried, right, on that front. But also we knew it, and so our focus became we wanted to do a lot more small events. We said we need to get in the singles business, because if we're just waiting for these big mega shows of 60, 70,000 people, what are we going to be used 5-10 times a year? Yeah. We're not going to survive. So we ended up doing is at the time the San Francisco Giants, Giants, they were considered probably the best in sports at non-sport business. So they created a company called Giants Enterprises, and all they did is they did non-baseball. They did they tied very closely with the CVB in San Francisco. They did a lot of folks went in there, the club space, a lot of the private events. They did things on the field. They did ski jumps. They did everything imaginable. So we actually hired them to show us their way. And then we went in and we changed things around. Again, we're ultimately a city group. We started providing commissions to a lot of our staff, which didn't exist before, and bonuses, just treating it like a private business, even though we're municipally owned.
Right.
And we went in, and then we ended up hiring a chief revenue officer from the Giants Enterprises, who now actually succeeded me as CEO. But it was really just the attitude. We're going in, and we're just going to. When we started that sector of our business, it was under $100,000 a year, and I think when we left, it was close to $3 million.
Wow.
So just going in, but again, it's singles. But to your point, though, the arena staff, the stadium staff, a lot of those places are owned by municipalities, by cities.
Yeah.
So they're going in, and I wouldn't call it glamour, but you just got to be prepared to work hard and going in and network yourself, which is key.
Tell me a little bit about your leadership style and the type of people you are looking to hire as the CEO of the Rose Bowl. Who are you looking to bring underneath you?
Well, it varied. Certainly there's some people who had specific type of expertise that we needed. For example, like the Rose Bowl, we've considered our field to be the stage, and we want it to be like the best field in the country. So we brought somebody in who had that specific expertise on that front. But one thing I learned from my mom is, because she owned I think she had like 12 stores at one time. She said, when you hire somebody who sort of complements your skills, doesn't have your same skills, because then you're going to be able to expand your knowledge. Okay. So that's pretty much what I did. Yeah. We hired a really. My focus was primarily revenue. I had common sense. Of course, I needed to understand everything, with traffic and parking and everything and anything. I needed to have a pretty good knowledge of it, but I really needed revenue. Okay. But I wanted somebody who had that same understanding and passion I have for revenue on the operations side. So I hired a COO, and that person's job was to really run the business day to day, and just really run the venue day to day. I'd say, just making sure of those things, that all those unsung heroes have somebody who is providing them leadership, who is on top of it. You're going in and just treating your employees right. Feed them. Yeah. It's pretty basic, but feed them well. Make them sure that you appreciate them. But my style really was leading by example. I worked a lot. I was in early. I probably worked 60, 70 hours a week for 20 plus years, I'd say, on that front, and just it became part of who I am. Yeah. It really did. But having that passion. When I was being interviewed for it, one of the board members, I got in a 5-4 vote, so it wasn't like unanimous or anything. Yeah. He just said, "Keep your passion." And I never forgot that, and I tried to do that, and I believed it. And I believed the Rose Bowl was a special place, and my role was to be its guardian, and to treat it like you almost treat a child, and try to put it in positions that could be successful in the long run.
That's so good. It's so powerful. Oh. It is powerful to hear from somebody who, I think everybody would look and see the title, but you're so much more than the title. Like the passion behind why you did what you did, the passion behind why you still do what you do, and even you coming on the podcast today is because you want to give back to others, because you had that same opportunity, because you still have the passion. You can still hear it in your voice. I want to do a little bit rapid fire. So I have 2 more real questions right after rapid fire. One, you said might be the most impactful move in your career, which I want to get to. But rapid fire real quick. What is the coolest moment in sports that you've been a part of?
I'd say the first event that I was in charge of, which was the 1999 Women's World Cup Final.
Doesn't get much higher than that.
That's what somebody said when it was over. A friend of mine who was a politician, he looked at me, he goes, "It's only going to go down from here."
That's awesome. Do you prefer East or West Coast?
East.
East Coast. even though most of your career
Yeah,
is on the West?
I'm still an East Coast guy.
All right. I
Always
like
will
that.
be. Always will be.
And I think it's important to not only talk about the good but the bad. What's the worst interview you've ever had where somebody sat across from you and you were like, wow, that was truthfully just really not good at all?
One time there was this, I don't remember his name, but we had this guy, and for whatever reason, he was like really nervous, and he had a sweating problem, and he just started perspiring, and like his whole shirt was wet, and his face, and I felt so bad for him.
Oh, yeah, that would stink.
Yeah.
I'm imagining being on his side of the table too. Just like probably can't stop it, right? Like
No,
you're like, I don't know
no.
what to do.
Yeah, no,
All right,
I felt
last
for him.
rapid fire. What would you tell yourself 40 years ago if you were going to start your career over?
If I was my career over, what would I tell myself? I said, make sure you aim high. Go almost the same thing. Start at the top, but you go high. Don't look low. You have a lot of potential in yourself, and you got to go in and be smart, be strategic, work the relationships, and work the relationships, and work the relationships.
Yeah.
But make sure you're aiming high and you go for it.
I love it. Last one, not a rapid fire question. I really want to dive into this one. You said that potentially one of the most impactful moves of your career was stepping away from being the CEO of the Rose Bowl. You aimed high. You were at pretty much the mecca of stadiums around the country at the top position. What led you to leave, and tell us why that decision was made?
Well, I decided to leave really, I know I loved it, which I did. And unfortunately, I'm doing something now which I really, really enjoy too, and that helps a lot. But I also knew I needed better balance. And what happened really was the company I was working for, the board of directors, they were at the Rose Bowl, they were concerned I was going to leave and we didn't have a good succession plan. So we agreed that they would hire me an executive coach to prepare for my future and the organization's future.
Okay.
So we went through and they gave me an exercise, and I would think at the time, probably about 5 years ago now, where you're going in, they said, okay, pretend it's 25 years from now. So that would put me over 80 if I did that.
Okay.
Right? And in the next 25 years, what do you want to accomplish? So that was my homework. So I went in, and I remember I really dug deep, and I looked at it very in the mirror hard. And the things I wrote, pretty much most of it, not all, but really relate to my family, and trying to figure out what I can do to spend more time, quality time, and with them. And I realized if I was going to stay at the Rose Bowl, I wasn't going to accomplish most of those, because the Rose Bowl was so consuming. So I knew I needed to go in and try to create, to do something else. And to retire from there, I wasn't ready to stop working, but I knew I needed to do something that I can do something a little bit different. And it worked out. My son lived in Arizona in Flagstaff, and we visited him. And what I did a few years before we ended up going there, I networked myself a little bit. I came to Arizona. I met with 3 or 4 different people, just through my own network per se. And then I ended up meeting a guy, Chris Nations, who I work for now, and then which I'm very fortunate that I did find something else. So we go in and we work with universities, we work with old stadiums, and we try to help them figure out how we're going to put together their future, and how we can help develop funding streams and so forth. So it's similar, because I will say of the accomplishments I had during my tenure at the Rose Bowl, if we didn't do a renovation, the Rose Bowl, its viability would be extremely questionable, because I think UCLA would have likely have left by now. I think the Rose Bowl game, there's a good chance, would have left by now, because what happens when a new stadium comes in, they take away all the business.
Yep.
So that our whole strategy was to go in, and we did a $200 million renovation, but our whole strategy with it was to go in and lock in and secure 30-year agreements with our anchor tenants, which was usually in the term of roses. So we did that, and then we wanted to build on it, and that's where music came in, and also as well as international soccer.
God, that is awesome. I appreciate you. Is there anything else pertaining to the listeners, our base audience, college kids, young professionals, that you find valuable that you'd like to give them today?
I think the planning part, I've written a lot of like business plans, more like outlines than full plans, but I've done business plans too. The first one I did 50 drafts on it, on that thing. But you're your own business. And I know the hardest job in the world is looking for a job. There's no question. But be very strategic. Treat it like it's your business. Your business is to find yourself a job. And you go in and figure out what you want to do with your career. But keep being retrospective and keep looking. And don't look short term, look long term. But also put yourself in a position to network yourself. And one of the things that Mark McCormick in his book that I picked up on, he's like, if you're going to socialize with people, you got to have the genuine like for that person. But it's not a bad thing to try to socialize with people who maybe have the type of job that you ultimately want, because other people will look at you and they look at you a little differently, versus if I'm hanging out with all the sales guys going into the racetrack, kind of a thing, versus dealing with a director of the department or what have you, and that's true. So as your parents teach you, careful about the company you keep. Well, sometimes that works to your advantage too.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you. Everybody, please, I don't even need to tell you this. Go share this. Everybody needs to hear this, especially as we get into the school year. Go share this with your entire club. Go share this with your entire team. Let everybody know about the information and the impact that Darryl just had with us today. Let's inspire others and continue to grow together.